Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely, let's do it.
All right, today we're traveling back in time, all the way to ancient India.
Ooh, ancient India, love it.
We're going to explore two philosophies that emerged during a period of immense societal change, Buddhism and Jainism.
Right. The 6th to 4th centuries BCE, a time of huge upheaval. Civilizations were transitioning from nomadic life to settled agriculture. And think about it, this shift totally reshaped how people viewed the world themselves, even their place in it.
Such a pivotal moment in history. And
Oh,
just like
yeah.
we saw with the Vedas back in episode 11, the philosophies that arose during this time give us a window into how societies deal with these monumental changes.
Exactly. It's like a snapshot of how people grappled with these new realities.
So we got Buddhism and Jainism emerging from the same cultural cauldron, both critiquing the traditional Vedic religion.
Yes, and challenging the authority of the Brahmin priestly class, too. They emphasized personal spiritual transformation instead.
But, and here's where it gets interesting, they both developed distinct approaches to spiritual liberation.
Like two siblings rebelling against their parents but choosing totally different paths.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So let's start with the shared value, ahimsa, nonviolence.
Yeah.
Both Buddhism and Jainism uphold it as a fundamental principle.
Right, but their interpretations and applications, well, they diverge in fascinating ways.
Oh yeah, like the Jains taking it to an extreme, wearing face masks to avoid accidentally inhaling insects. That's intense.
Oh, it is. For Jains, ahimsa stems from their belief in jiva,
Right.
the eternal soul that resides in all living beings, even the tiniest insect. So harming any life form, even unintentionally, it creates negative karma, hinders your spiritual progress.
It makes you really think about your impact on the world around you.
Hmm.
Now, Buddhists also advocate for nonviolence, but their interpretation of ahimsa seems, I don't know, a bit less stringent.
It is a bit different. While Buddhists acknowledge the importance of minimizing harm, they also believe in anatman, the idea of no self. Yeah. They focus on understanding the interconnectedness of all beings and recognize that actions driven by ego and attachment are the root cause of suffering.
So, nonviolence is important, but purifying your intentions and cultivating compassion is how you break free from suffering.
Precisely. It all comes down to very different perspectives on the nature of reality itself.
Right. For Jains, it's protecting individual souls in every being, while for Buddhists, it's recognizing interconnectedness and detaching from harmful actions. Fascinating how those nuances play out.
It is, and there are differing views on the nature of reality, like the self, the soul, the path to liberation. Well, it has profound implications for their spiritual practices, too.
Let's dive into those practices next. What distinguishes these two paths to liberation?
Well, for Buddhists, it's all about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path.
The Four Noble Truths. Those are like a diagnosis of the human condition, right?
Exactly. The first truth is that life inevitably involves suffering. Physical pain, emotional distress, that constant change that leads to dissatisfaction.
Makes sense. Suffering is a universal experience. What's the second truth?
The second truth identifies the cause of that suffering. It's craving, attachment, aversion, clinging to things that are impermanent.
Ah, so our desire for things that won't last is what causes us to suffer.
You got it. And the third truth offers some hope. It says suffering can end. But to end the suffering, you need to overcome that clinging.
So there's a way out. But how?
That's where the fourth truth comes in. It prescribes the path to liberation, the Eightfold Path.
The Eightfold Path. That's like a roadmap for ending suffering.
It is. But it's not a list of rules. It's a framework for cultivating wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. It encompasses things like right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action.
Right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness.
Yes, right concentration. It's about living your life with awareness, intention, and compassion.
Sounds like a lifelong journey of self-cultivation. And how does that compare to the Jain approach to liberation?
Well, Jainism emphasizes the three jewels: right faith, right knowledge, and right conduct. Right faith is having complete trust in the teachings of Jainism. Right knowledge is understanding the nature of reality as Jains see it. The concept of jiva, the principle of nonviolence.
And right conduct.
Right conduct is living by those principles. Often means sticking to a very strict code of ethics and engaging in practices like fasting and meditation.
So both paths involve ethical conduct, mental discipline, and a deep understanding of their philosophies.
They do. But I think it's fair to say that the Jain path seems more demanding.
Yeah. The level of asceticism and self-discipline required in Jainism is rigorous.
It is. For Jains, purifying the soul through rigorous self-control, non-attachment, and avoiding harm to any living being is the path to liberation.
So we've got these two philosophies, both aiming for liberation from suffering, but with different interpretations of reality and different paths to get there. It's like they're tackling the same problem with different tools.
Exactly. And those different approaches naturally lead to different impacts on society.
Let's explore that next. How did these philosophies shape the world around them? What was their social impact?
Great question. Let's start with Buddhism. One of the most striking things about Buddhism is how far and wide it spread.
It did. It became a major world religion with tons of different branches and practices. What do you think caused that widespread appeal?
Well, I think the emphasis on universal compassion and the accessibility of its teachings played a big role. You know, the idea that anyone, regardless of their background, can achieve enlightenment. It's powerful.
It really is. And what about Jainism? It didn't spread as far as Buddhism.
No, it didn't. With its demanding lifestyle, Jainism mostly started in India.
The strict asceticism and avoiding harm to all creatures probably made it tougher for most people to adopt.
It's a profound way of life, but maybe not so easily adopted by the masses.
True. But even though it wasn't as widespread as Buddhism, it had a huge influence within India.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when it comes to promoting nonviolence and vegetarianism.
Its principles even inspired figures like Mahatma Gandhi.
Exactly. It's remarkable how both philosophies, coming from the same cultural background, took such different paths.
And yet, both left lasting marks on the world.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How could two philosophies that critique the same traditional systems come to such different conclusions and practices?
It really does. It speaks to, I don't know, like the creativity of human thought,
Oh.
even when tackling similar problems. So let's go back for a second. We've talked about Buddhism and Jainism as reactions to existing traditions. Can we get into that historical and religious context a bit more? The Vedas, you mentioned them earlier, had a big impact, right, on Indian thought.
Absolutely. Huge. You can't understand Buddhism and Jainism without understanding the Vedas. I mean, think about it. These texts came about during a pivotal transition in ancient India, when society shifted from, nomadic life to settled agriculture.
Yeah.
Massive changes.
Right. New anxieties, new aspirations, all reflected in the religious and philosophical thought.
Exactly. The Vedas, they're like a collection of hymns, prayers, rituals, philosophical speculations, all reflecting this dynamic period.
Okay, so a collection of ancient wisdom. What are some of the key themes running through them?
Well, one of the big ones is Brahman, the ultimate reality, the cosmic principle that's like behind everything.
Brahman. So like the source code of the universe?
Yeah, the energy, the consciousness, that permeates everything.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. So where do humans fit into this?
That's where Atman comes in. The individual self, the soul, the essence of a human being.
Okay, Atman, the self.
Got it. And here's the thing. The Vedas suggest that Atman is ultimately identical to Brahman.
Whoa, hold on. So you're saying our individual selves are like sparks of the divine whole?
That's the idea. It's a question that's been debated forever, of course. But the connection between the self and the ultimate reality, it's a big theme.
Okay, I'm following. So how do dharma and karma fit into all of this?
Ugh, good ones. Dharma and karma. Key concepts. Dharma, think of it as duty, righteousness, living in alignment with the cosmic order. It's about recognizing your place and acting in a way that keeps everything in harmony.
So not just following rules blindly, but like understanding your role and acting for the good of the whole.
Exactly. And karma. Well, karma is action and consequence. The principle that every action creates a ripple effect.
So like what goes around comes around.
Kind of, but it's deeper than that. It's about understanding that our actions have far-reaching consequences, good or bad, and they can shape our future experiences.
It encourages us to take responsibility for our actions.
Yes. And it's fascinating to see how Buddhism and Jainism, even though they rejected parts of the Vedic worldview, they still incorporated and reinterpreted these concepts.
They took those ideas and ran with them in their own way.
Right. So we've talked about these big ideas, but the Vedas, they're not just philosophical, right? What about the rituals, the ceremonies, the gods?
Yeah, paint me a picture of what ancient religious life looked like.
Okay, imagine elaborate fire ceremonies, priests chanting hymns, offering ghee, grains into the flames, invoking the gods.
Wow, it sounds so vivid, like a real sensory experience.
It was, and these rituals, they were meant to connect with the divine, maintain cosmic order, bring prosperity.
Okay, so rituals were a big part of it. But we also have to talk about the caste system, right? It's a sensitive topic, but but it's connected to the Vedas, isn't it?
It is, and it's important to approach it with sensitivity. The caste system, as we know it now, with its rigid hierarchy, well, it evolved over time. It wasn't a sudden thing. And while there are hints of social differentiation in the Vedas, the rigid and discriminatory system that we see later, it was different.
So the Vedas might have had some influence, but the caste system we know is a much later development.
Yes. It's a reminder that we can't just look at ancient texts through a modern lens. We have to understand the historical context.
Right, right. We can't impose our values onto the past.
Yeah.
So the Vedas influence Hinduism, which became the dominant religion in India, correct?
Absolutely. The Vedas are foundational texts for Hinduism. They lay the groundwork for many key concepts and practices. But remember, Hinduism itself evolved over centuries.
So the Vedas were the foundation, but Hinduism kept growing and changing.
Exactly. And get this, they even influenced European thought, especially during the British colonial period.
The Vedas influencing European thought. How did that happen?
Well, there was this period of intense cultural exchange. 18th, 19th centuries, the British East India Company was expanding its influence. European intellectuals were fascinated by Eastern cultures.
So time of both fascination and conquest,
Yeah.
a complicated mix.
Yeah.
What about the Vedas specifically? How did that interest shape British interactions with India?
It's important to remember it wasn't just an academic interest. The British were consolidating their control over India. They wanted to legitimize their rule.
So they saw the Vedas as a way to understand Indian society and maybe even justify their presence.
Exactly. One way they did this was promoting the idea of an ancient constitution for India, claiming that the Vedas provided evidence of a long-standing social order, an order that they, as, enlightened rulers, were obligated to uphold.
Sounds like they were picking and choosing what suited them.
It was definitely a complex situation. You had genuine intellectual curiosity, but it was intertwined with colonialism.
Right, trying to admire Indian culture while also using it to increase their own power.
Exactly. And this idea of an ancient constitution, it had real consequences. Take land ownership, for example. The British saw land as private property, something to be bought and sold.
But that wasn't always the case in India.
Right. In many parts of India, land tenure was way more complex, lots of customary rights and obligations. Trying to impose this British system based on their interpretation of the Vedas, it caused disruption.
A clash of worldviews.
Yes.
Yeah.
It shows the danger of imposing a simplified interpretation of another culture. And we see this pattern in other areas too, the legal system, for instance.
So they tried to use their understanding of the Vedas to shape the legal system as well.
Exactly. They thought the Vedas provided a blueprint for a just legal system, and they tried to incorporate some elements of Indian law into their own hybrid system.
But ultimately, they were the ones in control, deciding what to keep and what to discard.
Right. It was a system that looked like it respected Indian traditions, but at the end of the day, maintained British control.
So these ancient texts filled with wisdom and spiritual insights, they ended up caught in the middle of colonialism.
It's a powerful reminder that we need to approach other cultures with respect and be aware of the dangers of appropriating traditions for political gain.
It's a cautionary tale.
It is. About power, knowledge, and how we interpret culture. A reminder that even great ideas can be twisted.
It's a reminder that history isn't simple. It's full of complexities.
And understanding those complexities is, well, it's crucial.
For navigating the present and creating a better future.
It is. It's crucial if we want to understand who we are and where we come from.
I like that. That's what's so cool about these deep dives. We're not just, learning facts. We're exploring how ideas change over time, how they shape cultures and societies.
Yeah, and how those ideas can be reinterpreted in different situations. Like we were just talking about, the British using the Vedas to justify their ambitions.
Right. It's a reminder that we need to think critically, question our assumptions, examine the motives behind the things we hear and read.
Oh, absolutely. Especially these days when there's so much information out there. And so much of it can be, manipulated.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot today. Ancient India, British colonialism, the rise of Buddhism and Jainism. We've really gone deep. But there's always more to learn, right?
Always.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. These deep dives, they're just the beginning.
Yeah, it's like we've opened a door to a whole new world.
And that's what makes it so exciting. It sparks your curiosity, makes you want to learn more.
It has been an incredible journey today, exploring the Vedas, diving deep into these philosophies, Buddhism, Jainism, and seeing how they got tangled up with colonialism. it's remarkable to think that these ancient ideas, they're still relevant today.
I agree. They're still influencing us, how we see ourselves, how we relate to the world.
They're part of this ongoing search for meaning, for liberation.
You put it perfectly. They offer timeless wisdom.
Okay, so as we wrap up, I have one final thought for everyone listening. We've seen how Buddhism and Jainism, they share some values like nonviolence and renunciation, but they have different interpretations of reality, different paths. Which path resonates more with you, and how can these philosophies help us navigate the world today?
That's a great question to reflect on.
It is, and it's one that we can all keep exploring as we continue learning and growing.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.